There are moments in a war when a distant capital suddenly feels very close to the front. When accountants' numbers become artillery ranges, and a line item in a budget moves the line of contact. This is one of those moments. Sweden, yes, the famously pragmatic, consensus-driven, fika-loving Sweden, has promised Ukraine 100 billion kronor in military and civil support. That's not a press release. That's a strategic earthquake from the Baltic to the Black Sea. The timing is sharp. On September 11th, 2025, Stockholm unveiled its 20th support package, Paket 20, and paired it with a 2-year framework that graduates Sweden from generous donor to system-shaping actor. The package itself is worth about 9.2 billion kronor, but the message is bigger. 40 billion kronor per year in military support in 2026 and 2027, plus at least 10 billion kronor per year in civil aid. Added up, roughly 100 billion kronor, about 9.1 billion euros, locked in with a calendar and a plan. In a war of endurance, predictability is a weapon. So, what's inside this promise? Start with the new military tranche. Sweden is procuring, not just donating, 18 brand new Archer 155mm self-propelled guns with ammunition, and pairing them with long-range drones. It's adding a maritime punch, coastal surveillance radars, cable ferries fitted with grenade launchers, diving chambers, crane lorries. And it's thickening the air defense lattice with ammunition, sensors, command and control gear for the Swedish Trident system already in Ukrainian hands, plus equipment for dispersed airbase operations and sensors to hunt drones and missiles. In ordinary English, longer reach, faster tempo, tougher skies, smarter logistics. Notice the method. After 2 years of pulling from what the Swedish armed forces could spare, Stockholm is shifting to industry pipelines. Most of Paket 20 is newly manufactured materiel, flowing from Sweden's defense base, because Ukrainian brigades need recurring deliveries, not one-time miracles. When artillery lines in Karlskoga and Swedish drone makers spin up for Ukraine, that's industrial strategy translated into artillery range. The civil side is warfighting by other means. Back in March, Sweden rolled out its largest civilian package yet, more than 1.4 billion kronor for energy repairs, housing, medical care, mine clearance, safe schooling, vocational training for women, and direct support to veterans. Money flows via the EU's Ukraine facility, the World Bank's URTF, the Ukrainian Red Cross, UNDP, UNFPA, and UN Women. Resilience engineered at national scale, so hospitals run, kids learn, and workers retrain, even under fire. In 2025 alone, Sweden estimates total civil support at about 7.8 billion kronor. That's how you starve the blackout and feed the comeback. And this isn't Sweden's first rodeo. With Paket 20, total Swedish military support since February 2022 reaches roughly 90 billion kronor, and total Swedish support, military plus civilian, tops about 102.8 billion kronor. The new 2-year framework doesn't reinvent the wheel. It bolts a bigger, faster wheel on the same axle. Why Sweden and why now? Because the country that once wore neutrality like a tailored suit now wears a NATO patch. On March 7th, 2024, Sweden became the alliance's 32nd member, ending more than a century of non-alignment. The Russian invasion didn't just change Swedish policy, it rewired Swedish public instinct. When your Baltic backyard looks like the world's most crowded chessboard, helping Ukraine isn't charity. It's forward defense with Scandinavian manners. The pivot shows up in steel and schedules. Sweden has already sent niche capabilities that carve out Ukrainian advantages. Think CB-90 fast assault boats, Baltic Greyhounds now running Ukrainian rivers, of which Stockholm donated 16 more in January 2025 as part of a record package, doubling an earlier batch. These boats aren't for parades, they're for night raids, rapid insertions, and denying the enemy the luxury of calm water. Add anti-tank weapons and investments in Ukrainian long-range strike production, and you see the pattern. Specialized tools, sustained at industrial scale. Air and airspace have been a Swedish signature too. Sweden broke new ground by donating 2 Saab ASC-890 airborne surveillance and control aircraft, flying radars that help knit together Ukraine's air picture. As F-16s arrive from partners, these eyes in the sky cue intercepts and coordinate defenses, extending the country's view and bite. The donation, part of Sweden's 2024 record package, is now moving into service and has been publicly acknowledged by both governments. When your enemy's missiles hunt in packs, you answer with information dominance. About Gripen fighters, the internet's favorite debate, Stockholm has been clear. Pause now, win later. At Allies' request, Sweden delayed transferring Gripen CDs so Ukraine can integrate F-16S without splitting training and logistics across 2 Western types. It's less cinematic than a runway handover video, but far more useful when hangars are targets and supply chains are finite. Post-war, a Gripen sale is very much on the table. Sweden is funding the flightline gear, air-based dispersal equipment, and sustainment threads that keep any fighter fleet alive. Fighter glamour is fun. Forklifts win wars. So which gaps does the Swedish pledge actually fill? 3 big ones: reach, tempo, survivability. Archer extends reach and accelerates the counter-battery duel. Long-range drones give precision beyond the horizon. Coastal radars and CB-90s complicate riverine and coastal logistics. And a denser air defense grid protects power plants, depots, and air bases, so the war economy keeps breathing. Wrap it all in crane lorries, ferries, and base gear, and you've bought tempo, the most expensive commodity in year 3 of a major war. That's what Paket 20 is built for. Speed matters, but so does predictability. The 2-year framework lets Kyiv plan rotations, training, and stockpiles with confidence. Sweden is underwriting deliveries from its own factories and European partners on a timetable the Ukrainian General Staff can trust. That's not a nice to have. That's the difference between hoarding shells and designing operations. And it's part of a wider European shift. More aid routed through procurement contracts, less scraped from aging depots. Europe is now the leading spender on weapons production for Ukraine. The North has become the engine room. If you want scale, here are 2 yardsticks. First, Sweden's 100 billion kronor runway across 2026 to 2027 equates to nearly 9,500 kronor per person, a serious household-sized bet on Europe's security. Second, 18 Archers is a battalion's worth of precision fires, arriving with ammunition and sustainment baked in. One moves politics, the other moves the front line. How is this landing in Kyiv? With gratitude and ambition. Ukrainian officials publicly thanked Sweden for Paket 20 and flagged the long-term framework as a significant contribution to the security of our continent. Between the lines, you can hear it. Swedish-Ukrainian surprises are being arranged, mixing new artillery, upgraded boats, radars, and a few systems nobody will name on camera. That's how coalition warfare works, announced the orchestra. Keep a few trumpets offstage. Meanwhile, Stockholm isn't acting alone. In August, Sweden joined Norway and Denmark to finance a US materiel package for Ukraine, paying dollars so Kyiv gets American kit faster through NATO channels. It's the quiet glue that keeps coalition pipelines humming, even when domestic politics elsewhere wobble. And Sweden's NATO footprint? It's no longer hypothetical. Swedish Gripens deployed to Poland this spring for their first enhanced air policing mission, while Swedish ships and an ASC-890 joined a broader Baltic Sea push to guard undersea infrastructure. In a region some now call a NATO lake, Sweden isn't just a shoreline, it's a sentry. Does Sweden punch above its weight? Judged by output, not volume. The country moved from ad hoc donations to industrialized multi-year commitments right as Europe shifted to contracts over cupboards. With Paket 20 declared and a 2026 to 2027 ramp to 40 billion kronor per year in military aid, Stockholm set a North Star other capitals can follow. If leadership is doing the necessary thing first, Sweden is leading. Back home, what does the politics look like? Surprisingly steady. The budget bill proposal explicitly cites an agreement with the Sweden Democrats, an unconventional coalition signal that the Ukraine line runs across the right-of-centre spectrum, and public opinion remains robust. Recent polling shows a strong majority of Swedes backing Ukraine, with support rates that sit at or near the top in Europe. When the electorate is steady, strategy can be too. There's a hard-headed economic logic as well. Sweden's parliament approved borrowing 300 billion kronor to accelerate rearmament, with most funds going to expand the army, build air defenses, and boost ammunition stocks. Channeling Ukraine support through Swedish industry sustains skilled jobs while refilling Ukrainian units. Call it the arsenal of social democracy. Build at home, defend abroad, deter together. On the civilian side, the details make it real. 1 billion kronor routed via the EU's Ukraine facility to shore up energy and housing. 100 million to the World Bank's URTF for grid repairs and clinics. Another 100 million to the Ukrainian Red Cross for psychosocial support and aid to the displaced. UNDP funds for demining. UNFPA support for emergency obstetrics and counter-GBV measures. UN Women programs for livelihoods and anti-trafficking. Even a Swedish vocational initiative training women as heavy vehicle drivers and mechanics, and helping veterans return to work. That's not window dressing. It's the carpentry of national recovery. On the battlefield, expect the archers to thicken Ukraine's counter-battery umbrella, pushing Russian tube artillery back or forcing it to hide behind worse terrain. Expect long-range drones to reach deeper into logistics hubs, bridges, fuel farms. Expect coastal radars plus CB-90s to make river crossings riskier and coastal resupply slower. Expect air defense upgrades to keep the lights on in the critical hours after strikes. And expect airbase gear to make F-16 operations more survivable under a missile rain. Wars don't tilt with one wonder weapon. They tilt with 100 screw turns, all at once. Internationally, Sweden's move pressures allies wrestling with their own politics. It sharpens the contrast with capitals still hedging or arguing about fatigue. When a mid-sized economy sets a transparent 100 billion kronor runway, military and civil, it sets a benchmark, per capita commitment and delivery discipline. And it lands amid a larger European story. In 2025, Europe overtook the US on the share of military aid sourced via industry. Practical, not performative. Of course, there are risks. Procurement takes time. The front evolves. Russia adapts. Any plan can be outpaced by battlefield entropy. But Sweden's architecture includes flexibility, multiple procurement channels, NATO coordination to plug US systems into gaps, and a civilian lattice designed to patch what's broken faster than the enemy can break it. It's what grown-up strategy looks like in a dangerous neighborhood. Let's talk headlines and hardware you'll actually see. In 2025 alone, Sweden announced its largest aid packages to date, including a March tranche worth 16 billion kronor and January's 13.5 billion kronor package that doubled CB-90 deliveries and financed Ukrainian long-range strike production. Packet 20 adds 18 more archers, and the 2-year pledge lifts military aid to 40 billion kronor annually through 2027. This isn't a sugar rush, it's a training plan. Per capita and per GDP, Sweden is punching well above the average European contributor. Nordic-Baltic leaders even bragged, politely, that they're among the top per capita donors. Donating 2 ASC 890s makes Sweden the first to hand Ukraine a proper airborne radar and command platform, a force multiplier for any future fighter mix. With Parliament's defence borrowing, Sweden is on a glide path to NATO's top spending bracket by the early 2030s, even as it bankrolls Ukraine now. Sometimes, the quiet countries make the loudest moves. And if you're Moscow, what message do you read? That the Swedish lion has found its roar. Stockholm is telegraphing endurance. 2 more winters of artillery, drones, boats, and air defense. And 2 more winters of Ukrainians with power, heat, and a functioning civic life. Russia can try to outlast. Sweden can outschedule. If you're sitting in a bunker planning a long war, that's chilling. If you're sitting in Kiev planning a victory, that's oxygen. Is there backlash in Sweden? Debate, sure. Backlash? Not really. The coalition consensus stretches further than expected, and public support proves sticky. Even better, much of the new aid flows through Swedish factories, so support Ukraine also reads hire Swedes. In politics, that's called alignment. In war, it's called staying power. What about results? Beyond the public thank yous, there are the quiet metrics. Fewer blackouts after strikes, faster repairs in frontline oblasts, expanded demining corridors, more secure airspace for incoming fighters, and a deeper magazine for artillery duels that don't make headlines but decide villages. Sweden's packages aren't Instagrammable, they're durable. That's by design. Zoom out to NATO and Europe. With US debates as turbulent as ever, Europeans are learning the adult lesson. You can't subcontract your neighborhood. Sweden's framework gives Brussels and the Nordics a model: predictable money, industrial sourcing, specialized capabilities. It nudges Germany's big checks, syncs with Poland's rearmament drive, and helps the Baltics sleep a little easier with Swedish hulls and sensors in the Baltic Sea. Leadership isn't a speech, it's a spreadsheet with delivery dates. So here's the question for the comments section. Is Sweden the real leader of Europe now, or just the first mover in a northern renaissance that drags the rest of the continent forward? Another question: when a once neutral nation becomes a NATO workhorse in 18 months, how many more neutral countries can Moscow afford to awaken? And a final one: if victory can be scheduled as well as fought, who's keeping better time? Because that's what this is, ultimately. Sweden circling 2 years on the calendar and writing deliver. For Ukraine, it means reach, tempo, survivability. For NATO, it means a new anchor in the north. For Europe, it's proof that production lines can be as decisive as front lines. And for anyone still underestimating Stockholm, it's a gentle Scandinavian correction, with steel under the smile.